Hello, my name is Paula Dugan. I'm the Children's Supervisor at the Needham Free Public Library. Today I'm going to tell a story for slightly older children, I would say ages 4 and up. It comes from the oral tradition. It's a folk tale from the Orkney Islands in Scotland. It's called Assipattle and the Muckle Mester Stoorworm. And you can help me tell this story. There are some things that you can do. This story has a king in it, and this king has an incredible sword called the Snicker Snacker. So when I say Snicker Snacker and I move the king's sword, you can do this. So it sounds like Snicker Snacker. He also has a lovely daughter called the beautiful Gem de Lovely. So when I say Gem de Lovely, you can go, ah. So it sounds like this. Gem de Lovely. And there's a monster in this story who takes 7 big yawns. So when the monster yawns, you can yawn with the monster. So those are your parts of this story. A long time ago, there lived a man called Assipattle, and he was the 7th son of a farmer and his wife. Now the farmer and his wife and the 6 older brothers worked very, very hard on the farm all day long. But Assipattle, well, he never worked on the farm. Instead, while his big, strong brothers were out there working hard, he would lay in front of the fireplace all day and think and imagine and dream and create these incredible stories in his mind. And then when his family came home in the evening and they all sat around the table for dinner, well, Assipattle would tell them the stories he'd thought up during the day, and he would amaze and amuse them all. They loved his stories. But still, his 6 older brothers would tease Assipattle all the time about being lazy and never doing any work on the farm. Now, at this time, there lived a monster called the Muckle Mester Stoorworm. He wasn't really a worm. He was more like a giant snake. He was so big, his entire body was as long as the whole world. So he would live under the oceans of the world, and he would wrap his enormous body all the way around the earth until his tail met his head. And then he would tuck his tail inside his mouth, and he'd suck on his tail. But every now and then he would get hungry, and he'd need more to eat than just sucking his tail. So he'd take that tail out of his mouth, and he'd uncoil his body from around the world, and he would start swimming through the oceans of the world looking for something to eat. And when he came to a shore, if he saw a cow, well, he'd just pop out of the water and lean over and eat it. And if he saw a sheep, well, he'd pop up out of the water and lean over and eat it. And if he saw a person, well, he would just pop up out of the water and lean over and eat that too. Well, now, it didn't take long before people got tired of having their cows and their sheep and their friends and relatives eaten. So, an angry mob stormed the castle and demanded that the king do something. The king was at a loss. What could he possibly do? So, to figure this problem out, he called on his wise man. Bring in the wise man! And so the castle guards called for the wise man. Bring in the wise man! 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 And in the wise man came. I'm old, I'm wise, I'm here. What do you want? And so the king told the wise man about the monster and the cows and the sheep and the people and the angry mob. And the wise man said, hungry monster? No, let me think about this. Take 7 people a day and float them out on a raft, and the monster will eat them, and that should be enough. So the king decreed it, and they did it. But people were still very upset about this. So the wise man said, I don't like that, eh? Let's see. I know. Blue-blooded princess should be worth 7 people. So tell you what you do. You feed the princess to the monster, and then he'll be satisfied and go away and leave everyone alone. Well, now the king did not like this. The princess was his only daughter, his only child, his heir. And she was beloved by all. She was the beautiful Gem de Lovely. The king would hate to part with the beautiful Gem de Lovely. So, to avoid having to give her up to the monster, he sent messengers riding out on horseback throughout the kingdom. And they went to every corner of the kingdom. They even went to Assipattle's farm. Now, of course, the mother and the father and the 6 brothers were out working in the fields. Only Assipattle was home when the messenger arrived and knocked on the door. So Assipattle opened the door. And the messenger said, "The king has hereby decreed that he is looking for a hero to save the princess, the beautiful Gem de Lovely, from being eaten by the monster. Anyone who can save the beautiful Gem de Lovely will be given half the kingdom and the king's miraculous sword, the Snicker-Snacker. Snick, snack. And the hand of the princess, the beautiful Gem de Lovely, as a reward." "Well, thank you for that," said Assipattle, and then he closed the door. And the messenger rode off. So Assipattle sat beside the fire, and he began thinking about this. Thinking and imagining and dreaming harder than he ever had before. And when his family came home for dinner that night, Assipattle had an incredible story to tell them about an amazing horse that could run faster than any other horse on earth. Well, his family loved that story. And after everybody went to bed, Assipattle tippy-toed outside his parents' bedroom door, and he listened beside the door. And he heard his mother and father talking. And his mother said, "Oh dear, wasn't that an incredible story that Assipattle told us at dinner tonight? I think that was one of his best stories ever. And you know what, dear? That story reminded me of that horse that you have, that horse Tikong that you have. Why, that horse runs so fast. I've never seen a horse run as fast as Tikong. How do you make Tikong run that fast, dear?" "Oh, well, that's very easy. You see, I keep a pig's bladder, it's kind of like a deflated balloon, inside Tikong's saddlebag. And when I blow on that bladder, it sounds kind of like this. And when Tikong hears that sound, why, he just takes off. He runs faster than the wind, and no horse can catch him." "Oh my, that's so amazing. It's almost like the horse in Assipattle's story tonight." Well, when Assipattle heard all that, he tippy-toed into the stable. He saddled up Tikong. He found that pig bladder inside Tikong's saddlebag, and he took it out, and he rode off. Well, now, the husband the farmer and the 6 brothers, oh, they heard somebody riding away from their stable right away, and they knew someone was stealing one of their horses. So they all jumped out of bed, and they saddled up the other horses, and they rode off after Assipattle. And Assipattle's father had almost caught up to them. But Assipattle, he took out that pig's bladder, like that deflated balloon, and he blew into it. And when Tikong heard that sound, he took off running so fast he was faster than the wind and no horse could catch him. Well, Assipattle rode that horse all night long until it was dawn. And he reached the shoreline and he looked out over the ocean and he saw the muckle mester stormworm sleeping out there in the water. He could see the monster's giant head. And he knew that when the sun came up, that monster would wake up and he would yawn 7 giant yawns. What to do? Well, nearby there was a little cottage, and he saw smoke curling up from the chimney of that cottage. So he looked and he saw the king's guard guarding a rowboat that would take the beautiful princess, the gemmed lovely, out into the ocean to be eaten by the monster. Well, Assipattle knew he couldn't let that happen. So he went over to the little cottage. He opened the door and peeked inside. There was a little old lady sleeping inside the bed. And curled up at her feet, there was a little cat sleeping. Meow, meow, meow. So Assipattle teepee-toed over to the fireplace where there was a fire smoldering. He took down an iron pot that was hanging there and he filled it up with some of the burning embers from the fire. Then he teepee-toed back over to the door. The little old lady was still sleeping. And the little cat was still sleeping. Meow, meow, meow. And Assipattle quietly closed that door. And then he waved to the guard, just like he was coming out of his own cottage early in the morning. Oh, hi! Hello there! The guard waved back. Yeah, hello. Kind of cold this morning, isn't it? Yeah, it really is. It's very cold. Well, I'm going to build a fire here and cook my breakfast. You're welcome to join me. Warm yourself up at the fire. Oh, no, thank you. I'd like to, but I can't. I have to guard the king's boat here. Well, okay then. Suit yourself. So Assipattle started digging in the sand like he was going to build his fire there and cook his breakfast. And all of a sudden, he jumped away. And he said, no, it isn't. No, it can't be. It couldn't possibly be. It is. It's gold. I found gold here digging in the sand. Well, when the guard heard that, he ran away from that boat. He ran over to where Assipattle was. He shoved Assipattle out of the way, and he started digging furiously in the sand looking for that gold. Well, while the guard was doing that, Assipattle ran right over to that boat. He launched the boat into the water, and he began rowing towards the head of the giant monster. Now the sun was coming up, and the monster began to wake up, and he took one giant yawn. Ooh! Now every time the monster yawned, the water would wash in and out of his mouth. And Assipattle rowed closer and the monster yawned again. "Ooh!" And the water rushed in and out of his mouth, and Assipattle rowed harder and faster and closer, and the monster yawned again. "Ooh!" And this time, Assipattle rowed right inside that monster's mouth. He rowed that boat all through the twisting, winding body of that monster until he came at last to the monster's liver. Then he took that iron pot he had with him and those burning embers inside, and he took those hot burning embers and he buried them inside the monster's liver. And that liver began to burn, and it hurt that monster, and that muckle Mr. Stoorworm rose up out of the water and began to spin and thrash and he spit out Assipattle, and Assipattle landed safely on the shore. Well, all this excitement and noise from the monster thrashing around in the water drew out all the people from their cottages in the village nearby, and the king and his beautiful daughter, the princess, the beautiful Gemdelovely. And they all watched while that monster spun around and thrashed and burned, and his teeth fell out one by one and floated away and became the Orkney and the Shetland Islands off the coast of Scotland. And then that monster curled himself up into a little ball as tight and small as he could make himself. And the monster died, and his body floated away and became what is now Iceland. Well, the king was so happy that his daughter was saved, and the beautiful Gemdelovely, when she had seen Assipattle's heroic deeds and what he had gone through to save her, well, she fell in love with him immediately, and she decided to take him for her husband. And so they were wed. And of course, the king kept his word. He gave Assipattle half his kingdom and his incredible sword, the Snicker Snacker, Snick Snack. And Assipattle and Gemdelovely lived happily ever after.